Got it. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Project Connect Community Advisory Committee to order. It's Thursday, December 12th, 2024, 5 p.m. at the Austin Transit Partnership Office Boardroom at 203 Colorado Street, Austin, Texas 78701. I'll be going through our roll call. So this is Chair Azhar. I'm here. Ms. Summers.
I'm here.
Mr. Gorse.
Here.
Mr. Hendricks.
Present.
Mr. Garza.
Here.
Ms. Perry.
Here.
We do not have, as far as I can tell, but I'll call it out, Ms. Mayer. And she might be joining us and we'll acknowledge her when she does. Ms. Plateau. Mr. Brooks. Mr. Reed.
Here.
And Mr. Crossley.
Here.
Thank you all so much for being here. Our first item is, of course, the land acknowledgement, and Ms. Berry will be leading us through that.
Thank you. To ground yourself before starting this meeting, it's important to talk about the history of this region. Long before it came to be known as Waterloo or Austin, this region has drawn people here for thousands of years, in part because of our waterways and the wealth of natural resources. This region has been home to the Tonkawa, the Coahuilteca, as well as the Comanche, Lipan Apache, Sana, Humanos, and many others I may not have named who are also caretakers of this land. I highlight this history because Native and Indigenous peoples are—
Ms. Berry, I'm so sorry. Can I ask you to slow down a little for our interpreters? Thank you.
Yes. Do I need to start over?
No, I think you should be good.
I highlight this history because Native and Indigenous peoples are routinely erased from the conversation, referred to as having disappeared or having been conquered. Native and Indigenous peoples are still here and present in what we now call Austin. The pursuit of white land ownership, profit, and so-called progress has harmed Black, Indigenous, and people of color in this city. The effects of the legacy of settler colonialism, the theft of land, slavery, and genocide are still felt and present with us today. It's vital to keep this history in mind as you do this important work and to make a commitment to stop perpetuating the cycle of violence against Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. This takes us to public comment. Do we have anybody who signed up to speak? For our attendees who are joining us virtually, if you would like to speak, if you raise your hand, we can make sure that you have the ability to do that. Not, we can move forward. So our first action item is the approval of our November 14th, 2024 CAC meeting minutes. Does anybody have any feedback? I know there was some feedback provided via email and that was incorporated. If nothing else, do I have a motion to approve our November 14th, 2024 meeting minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Summers. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. So we have a motion from Ms. Summers, seconded by Mr. Crossley to approve our November 14th, 2024 CAC meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Thank you all so much. And this takes us to our discussion items, which really the first one is an update on the Austin Light Rail Phase 1 implementation. And we do have ATP staff present for that purpose. So we'll hand it over to them.
We do, and I will do the very brief introduction of hello, everyone. We're very excited to have somewhat new staff members here for you all to meet because we want to encourage more of our staff to come in and talk about what they're working on every day diligently. So you can get to more know people than just me, Giannis, and Sophie as we keep going. They've designed a presentation that should take about 15 minutes to go through. We're trying to keep it somewhat short and tight because I know this is a shorter meeting overall, but consider this a step one of conversation. So if we don't answer all questions today, we will absolutely come back as needed as we go into 2025. And with that, I'm turning it over to the team. Introduce yourself, starting with Lisa.
Hello, Lisa Storr, Director of Architecture, Urban Design, and Sustainability at ATP.
Good evening, Sophia Ojeda, Austin Transit Partnership, Engineering and Construction.
Hello, Alex Medina, Urban Designer with ATP.
Good evening, Alvin Livingstone, Austin Transit Partnership, Engineering and Construction.
All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So today it's a pretty much short agenda. We're going to be talking about third-party coordination and design and project-wide requirements that are currently in development. Next slide. For utilities, we have what's called the utility rules of practice, and that's the foundation for our utility design. And our design is based on these parameters. So that way we can space-proof for utilities that need to be relocated on as a result of the project. And we're coordinating with city departments, private utilities, and developers along the corridor using the utility rules of practice to help define our needs for the light rail, including betterments. For permitting and ordinances, we are working with city staff and getting to a point to enable an efficient and streamlined process that our upcoming progressive design builder can use and take advantage of through a set of working groups, internal working groups, leading to a light rail permitting manual. For agreements, these are third-party agreements that we are actively working on and writing that we will need in place to cover what we're building for the light rail. And they also are a federal requirement in order to have them executed in order for us to receive our full funding grant agreement. Next slide. Design requirements are an important thing to have in a design project. Is what they do is they help set guardrails for what the design could look like and should look like. We do have various types of requirements in the form of criteria, standards, specifications, and guidelines, with the focus of them being developed as functional requirements so that we still allow innovation from the progressive design builder during final design. Next slide. A little more detail on the utility rules of practice. Again, ATP and the city created this set of utility rules to explain how to handle utility conflicts that may be related to the Austin Light Rail project. It offers a clear plan for moving utilities out from under and along the guideway, whether that's to relocate the utility or to leave it in place. Among many other things, it also defines what we call a utility-free zone, shown in the graphic in a orange-pink color. And that's where all utilities must be cleared, so that way we have room to construct our own infrastructure for the light rail system, such as, the track, foundations, structures, things of that nature. And with our ongoing engineering contracts, we do continue to gather information on existing utilities to help us identify proposed conflicts. For power distribution and rail systems, here I want to focus on power distribution being what Austin Energy is providing to the light rail. As part of the light rail system in general, we have what are called traction power substations, and those power the trains, which also power some of the system. But we need to power those substations, and that's what we're asking for from Austin Energy. And we have been working with them to make sure that they do have the capacity to provide and support our project to not only run the trains, but as a system as a whole. We do have a campus for our operation and maintenance facility, which is going to be extremely large, as well as station areas that will also require power. The goal for us is to have a reliable and a resilient system. And to achieve that, we need some redundancy. So if one traction power goes offline, we have another one that's able to carry that load and keep the system running. Next slide. Light rail vehicles. This is more of the more of the public facing part of the system, other than the stations that Lisa and Alex will talk about later. We do have a cross-departmental working group that's working on what our light rail vehicles will look like in the form of technical requirements, with the customer experience in mind as well. So there will be opportunity for community input as we continue to advance the planning and the procurement of those vehicles. One thing that we are keeping in mind and keeping our ear to the street on is the market. It's rapidly changing in this area. So we are staying involved and kicking off some industry review scheduled for spring of 25.
Okay, thanks, Sophia. Maybe I just wanted to zoom out for a second and think about, I just wanted to give a little bit of like a frame here, right? So I think in lots of updates that you're hearing from ATP relating to light rail, you're hearing a lot about NEPA, about project delivery. And this is really our chance to kind of show off this work stream that's been a little quieter right now, but it's not like we haven't been busy. So as you just heard about all of the engineering work and readiness, and then vehicles, which is super exciting. We also have the architecture and urban design guidelines that have been developed. You may have a little bit more familiarity with this because about a year ago, we did this community engagement related to user experience and came before you all with some of those results. But really, that has resulted in architecture and urban design guidelines for Austin Light Rail. These focus on that user experience and the transit experience where people will interact with the light rail system and thinking about their entire user journey. So not just while standing on the platform, but for getting there and getting to where they're going. The criteria and the guidelines address multiple scales here. So it's system-wide, neighborhood scale, stations and station area, which includes the blocks around the platforms themselves, and then the station platforms. Next slide. And like I said, you all may see some familiar shapes here in this pyramid or triangle. So these are all based on some deep research we did from both the behavioral and place-based research in Austin and what transit is like in Austin. And then also what transit needs to have to make folks want to ride the light rail, which resulted in this user needs. We took that before community about a year ago, like I said, and sort of framed up that in results last year. And so now we've got these urban design guidelines. Next slide. And the key framing concepts within those architecture and urban design guidelines are here. I'm just going to go through each one. So light rail as a greenway. So not just the light rail itself, but because we have the opportunity of rebuilding the alignment for the entire right-of-way, that includes sidewalks, trees, bike lanes, other modes, and the connections of that first and last mile in many cases. We also have stations anchor neighborhood hubs. So these station locations.
Turn off one computer so I can exit out.
Am I okay? Okay. These stations will be sited within neighborhoods in Austin. And so we would like them to function as a holistic part of and potential catalyst for being there. The third one is consistent and site specific. This has a lot to do with both the consistency of the light rail as an entire system, so you recognize it and you know what it is as you get there, but also reflecting the importance of that neighborhood and the character and the scale of it. Intuitive and comfortable for everybody. This is not just from a wayfinding perspective and knowing where you are, but also from a thermal comfort, thermal safety perspective, and trying to make it an ease of access when we're using the light rail. The last one is resilient and cost effective. This is not only about constructability, but about the entire life cycle of the system and ensuring that it is maintainable, it will last for a long time, and we are building it for generations. And with that, I'll turn it, oh, nope, one more thing, sorry. Aside from the architecture and urban design guidelines, our work group has also developed the sustainability criteria and guidelines. This is a framework for making sure that the entire alignment and the operations and maintenance facility and all of the program within that meets some standard requirements when it comes to sustainability. This means we have crosswalked those typologies. So when you think of all the elements within the light rail, it's not just the civil portions, the rail itself, it's those stations with platforms. It's also the operations and maintenance facility, the park and rides, and everything that comes along with that. We've crosswalked those with third-party rating systems, including Austin Energy Green Buildings Rating System, LEED, Sites, Envision, and ParkSmart, to create a framework that is a level set across all of those typologies to ask for common data sets from our teams as they go through design and construction. So tracking things that are important to us, like water use or energy use or carbon in materials and things like that. This provides a flexible framework and a toolkit for the next phases of design and our progressive design builder. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Alex to talk about some of the other work streams.
Thanks, Lisa. So part of the urban design or product realm is also a back of curve. Huh? Oh, yes. We'll go slow then. And really understanding what is the right configuration for a lot of the segments along the corridor. Understanding the back of curve means sidewalk, bike lanes, tree furniture, and what is the right configuration for like different segments, different neighborhoods, different zones. So working with the city, we went through this analysis of the different segments and what is the priority for these segments. Eventually, through a series of meetings and workshops, we came up with this back of curve prioritization guide to really understand what is going to guide us as a designers along the corridor. But it's also how are we going to inform private development, and eventually how is it going to be implemented in terms of regulatory frameworks. So right now we're still in coordination with the city, understanding how are we going to implement these back of curve changes and how this back of curve is going to help mobility, ridership along the corridor. So the next slide will be the tree menu. We've been working with this document to really promote tree preservation through different systems and techniques, understanding that urban canopy, shade, and even carbon offset is vital for our city. So as a program, we're really interested in this and how does this actually improves our urban realm. So these two documents are going to help us eventually improve our urban realm and environment. And with that, I'll pass into Alvin.
Next slide, please. All right, so what does 2025 look like going forward? A couple of things that we're trying to get through is the environmental clearance. That means getting through the DEIS and ultimately the FEIS. We're trying to onboard a delivery partner here. So first part of next year, we're going to get a new delivery partner. And for those who don't know what a delivery partner is, that's a consultant that helps us with the administration of the project going forward. So they help us from the design side and the construction and setting up operation and maintenance. And we're going to have that team on board for us to help us with that. Preliminary engineering is where we are right now, is trying to develop the level of design to make sure that it's ready for our progressive design builder. We are hoping that we get most of that work done here by spring of this year, so we can have it prepared for our progressive design build later on. And Sophia mentioned the third-party agreements. Those are so critical for us right now because that's going to impact a lot. We need to make sure that all the utility companies, as an example, know exactly what they're doing. We want to make sure that our partners understand what their relationships are and what our relationships are in regards to delivering the project as well. So we're working with trying to make sure all of those things are done. But the real thing is to try to get to construction. We're trying to get into construction, as you guys know, and permitting and ordinance amendments. Those are some of the things that we're working on right now, hoping that we can get to a place where when the progressive design builder comes on, that they have all the tools they need to just seamlessly be able to get permits, be able to do everything that they need to get into construction so we don't get delayed and doesn't cost us in the long run. A bunch of other things that we touched on as well as far as light rail vehicle solicitation. That's going to be big for us because that design ties in with what the design for the tracks look like. Believe it or not, that's major because if someone messes up on the wheel and the track interface doesn't work, then you have issues, and some projects face that. But we have an integration team to make sure that all that stuff ties together. The business assistance program and public art program, we don't quite have a public art policy yet. That's something that we're working on developing and implementing at some point because there's opportunities for art along the alignment, whether that's at stations, at traction power substation sites. There's just different places to do that. So those are some things that we're looking forward to trying to get done in the next year. With that, I guess we're going to open it up for any questions.
Thank you so much. Folks with questions or comments?
I have a
Oh,
question.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question. On the, sorry, I wrote down notes quickly, so I'm trying to figure out my own notes. I believe the community engagement results, I know that was a year ago, but is that something that can be found easily? I know maybe it's in the minutes from a previous meeting, or how can we find those?
And so all of our community engagement reports that summarize our engagements are available online, so we can make sure to link them to you. I could not tell you off the top of my head how to get there off the website, but we can make sure, but everyone's can access them. Yes.
Okay, great.
We also did review them with you all in February. So I don't know if that meeting is easy to access, but you could find it that way too.
Okay.
Yeah, there was actually two, because there was one at the start of the process and then there was one that reviewed the results of the process. So I think actually it would be great to, if you have time to watch a lot of videos, you could watch both of those. I think would really coach you up on what they did with that. And
Okay.
they were great presentations and discussions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Also, I'm curious, with the Austin Energy coordination on power supply points and the power distribution, and I'm not sure, I know that was Austin Energy was a heavy topic today at City Council, and like the discussion of solar and all of that. Is that something that you guys have been looking into, something you can look into? I'm not sure on the specifics on what can and cannot happen. But like I said, I just heard a lot and saw a lot of that today at City Hall. So I'm curious if you guys have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity for solar in several different places. Maintenance facility is one in particular. Sometimes there's opportunities over the stations as well. In terms of putting solar panels up, it just really depends on what we can do and what makes the most sense to kind of tie in with the design. But also we've talked to Austin Energy on other things in terms of, and Sophia showed the slide too as well. It's really just to make sure they have enough power to power the system and get us what we need to at those points. And so because we're looking at 9.8 miles or different areas, and we have to get fed by different substations. But ultimately, to answer your question, I mean, what it really comes down to is that there is an opportunity for solar, but we're going to get more into that as we get further along in design.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And is there any feedback from the community, like any community input when it comes to sustainability? Was that part of the community input that was done previously? Specifically, like not just, and I'm also curious, when you guys get community input, is it one of these like, these are our plans, do you want 1 or 2 trees? Or is it like, really give us your ideas kind of input?
Sorry. I will say the sustainability criteria right now are really a flexible, light toolkit to lay out our sort of baseline. And the intention and the workflow for that was a lot about partnerships with the city of Austin and with CAT Metro as our partners to make sure that we were rolling up to larger community goals. So right now, given where the 2021 climate equity plan and how that was, approved, it requires Project Connect to do what we need to do in order to hit its goals too. And that's also true for the Austin Strategic Mobility Plan, for CAP Metro's plan. Like we are tied into a lot of other pieces. So this document essentially sets these baseline criteria that we must do. And it's not necessarily like the meat of it yet. I fully expect that we will come out with more community conversations related to many topics that have to do with sustainability. As you know, it's like a very integrated aspect of the program. But we haven't yet really had a specific sustainability like conversation with the community yet.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Go ahead, Ms.
Yeah,
Summers.
yeah, I'm really obsessed with shade and trees. And I mean, one of the things that we learned actually was the community also is. We learned that in the engagement that people in Austin are really focused on shade at transit stations. And so I'm just going to repeat that finding over and over. So I think that a few of us in the community activists have been thinking about shade funds and how to like transform for more shade. And obviously one way is street trees. And I saw just in the little, overview that we saw, I saw some real intriguing pictures of like ideal, good, maybe acceptable, like with the trees and things. And so that's really exciting that y'all are working on designing those things. One of the things that a lot of us have noticed with street trees is the responsibility for street trees is often very vague within our community. So a lot of times maybe a private development as a condition of its construction is required to put in street trees. But then do they have to water them? Can they cut them down? We've seen that actually happen. I'll have a lot of exciting things planned with street tree discussions going forward, but in this community. But so I think that one of the things that we've learned is that, sometimes we can design and place trees, but then maintaining the trees and, for a generation is very difficult. So I would really encourage, knowing what a community priority this is, really encourage to think through, like if we're requiring people to put trees, if ATP is planting trees, have a plan for the maintenance of those trees. Because what we have seen, unfortunately, in some cases, and climate change may not be helping us here, is that we've planted street trees, we've taken that action, but sometimes those trees have died, they've been pruned really weird. I would point to like the Kramer Lane red line stop, like somebody came in and pruned those trees real crazy and killed a bunch of them. So anyway, lots of interesting things with that, but just really thinking through, this is a generational investment, not just in the concrete, but also in the tree planting as well, and really have plans and agreements that make sure that investment is protected and continued within the community. And somebody is like the tree advocate, like I'm the caretaker of these trees and they're going to exist, or they're going to be replanted if they die. With that also, I mean, one of the things that we've also learned, if you've been following the Green Streets Initiative as well, is that that trees are messy, right? We know that they don't, you don't pour put a tree in a hole and then it stays the same. It has roots that spread, right? And so people that work with utilities, that can be a little stressful because tree roots can kind of do things we don't really want them to do when we're trying to build something that, like that's going to stay around and not get strangled by tree roots or something like that. So one of the things, unfortunately, as well in engineering construction, sometimes we've seen, a lot of requirements be placed on trees, like we're going to put them above the ground in a box, or it's just got only this much room for its roots or whatever. And so I think like we've got to, as a community, find better ways to address that. I think that some of what we've seen in terms of requirements with the trees are not things that are going to really set the trees up for success, which then doesn't meet our community shade goals. So I would encourage y'all to continually return to the voice of the community, which told us how important shade is, trees are obviously like a crucial, like keystone piece of that shade. And like anybody who's telling you, I can only give the trees like this much room for their roots, like you got to come back to what the community said, which is that we need these trees and what trees need to thrive. So anyway, that's just my tree rant. Much more to come from me on trees over the years, I think. But anyway, yes.
Snaps, thank you, and appreciate the advocacy and the interrogation here, for sure. I will just gleaning a little bit more of a peek into what that comprehensive tree manual has done, just so you have some background. We've been working very closely with the city arborist office and the arborists within the Great Streets program, HARD, others, in order to make sure that that comprehensive tree manual is learning from the lessons that came from the street tree standards within Great Streets and that the city adopted in 2000, which have not yet been updated to be new standards. We are using their best practices moving forward. So that gets rid of that above ground tree box, that gets rid of limited soil volume unless there's special construction methods. We get real nerdy with it. So, you know, at some point we'll be ready to share more widely. But they are sort of hand in glove with us in the development of this and have reviewed it every step of the way. The really innovative thing that does that has not yet been produced as like a work product within the city of Austin, because there's a lot of details and best practices for planting new trees and understanding what those new street trees need in order to thrive, which is typically 1,000 cubic feet of soil. And that's getting to your volume issue. But what we haven't yet done and what we're doing in this manual is detailing out means and methods for designing around existing trees and allowing those existing trees to continue to thrive as well. So it's going to be very cool, but it's all within like city code and criteria, and having the city arborist, you know, go through those reviews with us really deeply. So I'm hopeful that it's cool and that it kind of meets the spirit of what you're talking about. Our ambition is certainly to provide a lot more shade along the corridors than exist right now. Cheers.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Crossley.
I have a question, which maybe it's just asking for clarification where something is in the various things. So what I'm wondering about is the street design and how I was very excited by the back of curb concepts. But then between the curb and the light rail, there's people driving cars in some parts of this project. And where is that design and like our decisions still like there were sort of political arguments about, do we make someone walk across several lanes of car traffic to get to a light rail station? And so where are those decisions at this point? Is that in the preliminary engineering or how does that work?
Yeah, so what the streets look like is included in our preliminary engineering, but we don't do it in a silo. Being ATP, we actually engage our partners. So there's feedback from the city of Austin and their transportation and public works department have been very instrumental in that. So we have a layout of what it looks like. We look at it in terms of traffic, and we look at it in terms of access to driveways. We look at it in terms of left turn lanes and where exactly those go. So we lay those out, and of course the way the alignment is set up, they're in different areas. So you got Riverside, you got South Congress, you got Guad. So all those have different characteristics, but ultimately those designs are set up as such to allow for the best use of the guideways based upon the constraints that we have, because we're in effect adding something new that folks aren't used to. So, but I think we're in a good place, and when the DIS gets shown, you'll have a chance to see what that actually looks like.
Appreciate that. Do you have any follow-up, Mr. Crossley? Or?
Maybe this is a much bigger question. A DIS will go out, then everybody gets to read it and comment, and then designs can change. And there will be room for people to comment on those parts too.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we anticipate getting comments, quite a bit of comments. And we do have to address and respond to all comments. And so and then the intent is that once we get those comments and what we can address, we'll address in the subsequent FEIS. But yeah, you'll get a response one way or the other. But the intent is to try to make sure that we're being fair with those comments and we're being responsive, most importantly.
Okay, great.
And for those who don't know the FEIS, the final environmental impact statement.
Mr. Gorse.
Just to follow up on what Jay was asking, do you have a timeline in terms of when you think the designs will be out and available for us to comment? And are you going to come back? I assume you're going to come back with it to this committee. I'm just wondering because it seems like something we'll want to be aware of. So I'm just wondering when we should expect something, assuming you know that.
Yes, absolutely. So we are planning to release our draft environmental impact statement, which would include everything that Alvin just spoke of in January timeframe. So we'll be coming back to the CAC during that comment period. The comment period is scheduled to last for 60 days. So we'll be running January through March, essentially, beginning of March.
Okay, thanks.
And if I might just add, Mr. Gorse, you're right, it will be coming to the CAC. We're still figuring out what the structure of that meeting looks like, but we want to make sure, honestly, it might just be the full 2 hours dedicated to just that, with the ability for folks to be able to engage in a different way than just a regular meeting. Other questions or comments?
I don't know if it's.
You're gonna have to go out to the microphone. I will say you might have to do some, we usually don't do community comment at this time, but you should be able to ask your question. It's totally okay. Go ahead.
Let go.
Okay. It might not be the correct time for this question. I live in Oak Hill in West Austin, and I did see on the Project Connect map, it connects North Austin, East Austin, and South Austin, but not West Austin. I know it might be a bigger discussion, but I was just wondering if there's any possible point in the future that it might be connected in like a future phase or something.
I'll just quickly respond. I know if somebody from staff wants to jump in. So we have rapid elements and other elements that are part of the work that CAP Metro is doing. So the Austin Transit Partnership, the presentation we're getting today is really looking at the light rail work. And then there's additional park and ride circulator, rapid work with different phasing opportunities for the CAP Metro side. And you should, or any community member who's listening should go look at our, I want to say it was our last meeting where CAP Metro came and presented and talked a little bit about those. And we had a question. So yes, to that question, there is a number of elements that will go in those places. The phasing of it is different and will work over time in sort of different ways. But today, like, we're really focused on the light rail. So yes, on the map and everything you're seeing, you're not seeing those elements at all. It really is that first phase of the light rail. And I'll make sure we get any questions online. I know I have some comments and questions. Maybe I'll just start. A lot of them honestly have already been said, so it might just be comments at this point. One, I'll be honest, I think I'm just very excited to see the sort of very conscientious effort of looking at green space and making sure we're tying it to climate equity and all sorts of things. So right at the end of the day, this is a transit project and a light rail project, but it's good to see sort of the different benefits that our community is getting, including frankly, green space, particularly in the Riverside corridor. I know we have Roy Guerrero Park, but frankly, on the corridor itself, it is quite parkland deficient. So I think just having that green space that folks can utilize and enjoy, I know would be a benefit for a lot of the residents there. I think on the, I'll piggyback off of kind of what you were saying around the sort of trees conversation as well. When we've tried to do great streets in other places, it's really utilities and the conflicts with utilities that have become a real challenge, where I think in our code and other places, we're saying something is required, but when site plans start going through, where your electric box is, you can't do it, and there's a fire hydrant, then there's the underground utility, yeah, it's so on and so forth. And at some point, what we're seeing is in a lot of places, the trees start disappearing because of different reasons. So I guess it sounds like y'all are working with city staff. I just continue to work with particularly Austin Energy and Water with the utilities to make sure that we're working. I don't know if y'all want to say anything or. Okay. The other piece of it is, I think, I would like to understand when we're thinking about it, are you all specifically talking about setting criteria for the ATP design infrastructure? So, or are you also looking at how it would look like on, let's say, the sidewalks on the other side? So essentially, I'm kind of thinking there's the public right of way and the ADP built infrastructure piece, and then there's the private property where we're going to be asking for some trees like great streets, et cetera, as well. And I guess, are y'all looking at both?
So great question. And that delineation line is really, important to us because there's only so much that we have ownership and the ability to affect within our project footprint. So a lot of that goes into the back of curb reports and that sort of working group and criteria that Alex talked about. But we are working very closely with our city partners who are also looking at regulatory updates from that perspective when it comes to back of curb. So there is a Great Streets update that is in process. There's some other area specific updates that are coming along our alignment that may adjust what that back of curb expectation is for development, whether that is before we're able to get there in construction or after, so that we're able to better coordinate across that line.
I appreciate that. And I think that makes perfect sense. And what I'm thinking is, I think as this comes out, if necessary, you're right, the great streets in downtown and then the EDOT design sort of that we put, at some point, we might have to go back and readjust those design criteria that we're going to have to make sure it's all matching. Because of course, from within the footprint of the work that y'all are doing, I'm going to assume there's an increased degree of complexity because of underground electric and other infrastructure. And although that, of course, exists within the public right of way, otherwise it's just not that degree of complexity either.
I also just want to highlight here the diligent coordination effort that is underway for those permits that come through along the way. So there's involvement and double cross-checking and project level coordination through our city's Project Connect office that allows us to sort of have insight and coordination with those developments to try and make sure that those not just streetscape elements, but also utilities are well coordinated.
I appreciate that. Do you want to add something? Go ahead.
Yeah, can I add something? So I want to give the team a little bit of credit.
Slower.
So when you talk about the coordination with the regulatory requirements, I think one of the things that we realized is that, and why one of the principles is consistent and site specific, is because we realize that as the light rail alignment moves through the city, the context that it's moving through varies quite dramatically, right? Downtown is very different from East Riverside or from South Congress. And there are varying regulatory controls on those neighborhoods as well. So it's not a one size fits all, right? We've got to actually have a kind of a neighborhood specific strategy within each neighborhood as the light rail moves through it. And so we're trying to develop those neighborhood specific guidelines as well, so that the light rail really is fitting seamlessly into those neighborhood characteristics, reflecting them, enhancing those neighborhoods, et cetera.
Appreciate that. And I'll try.
Introduce himself and say who he was.
I'm sorry, what? Mr. Mullen, can you please on the record say who you are and who you are affiliated with?
Sorry, that was Peter Mullen, Executive Vice President for Architecture and Urban Design, ATP.
Thank you. Two other things. I'm sorry. I really do want to let folks go soon, not keep them. One thing, I think it just didn't get mentioned. I know we've talked about that before when the team has come, particularly looking at sustainability, but I'm assuming we're looking at sort of weather and drought resistant plants and looking at sort of natural ways of doing that. Kind of what you were saying. I was fortunate enough to visit I was fortunate enough to visit Phoenix and they use bougainvillea, which is a pretty dry and heat resistant plant. But it's interesting how they were using it in sort of meshed cages because it is a thorny plant. So it's interesting to see sort of all the different elements of how we have, to your point, not plants that will die over time, but have plantation and trees and green space that can survive in our climate.
Definitely, but way more to come and much more detail to come.
Appreciate that. And then the last thing I'll just say is, we were talking about sort of the way the utilities are handled and the comment on sort of what happens if there is a blackout, how that gets managed. I'm assuming as part of this, are we also thinking of extreme weather events like freezes? I mean, that's much harder because all of Austin Energy, the grid starts going down. It's a much different system collapse than just a loss in one sector. I don't know, but is that something that's being considered as well?
It is when we're coordinating with Austin Energy. Those are some of the studies that are ongoing for that. Considering we've experienced that in the area before, it's a worst case scenario for us. And again, that's where kind of the redundancy and the resiliency and the reliability of the system comes in. I mean, quite honestly, there may be a point where we're just not running light rail because it's too icy. It just doesn't work together. So the system itself may be shut down due to weather events, not necessarily because of a power outage.
I appreciate that, Ms. Summers.
Yeah, I'd like to actually sort of semi-respond to something that Mr. Mullen said about the site specific, which I totally and absolutely agree with. There's lots of ways in which something should be site specific. I mean, just think about public art, right? One neighborhood may want a different type of public art that recognizes its history and identity in a different way than another neighborhood. That's great. But one of the things in planning, I think sometimes that we can be a little prey to is sort of path dependency with urban design, where it's like, well, this area is sort of suburban in form. It's not very walkable. It's not very safe. No one wants to walk here. And recently, very recently, actually, I had someone tell me that about this street. Well, nobody wants to walk there, so we're not really thinking about making this better. And I kind of said that to me, and I was like, well, obviously, if we're not going to make it better, continuously, no one is going to walk there. So like, I think that like, we have to be a little like, in Austin, we have this tendency sometimes to think no neighborhood is created alike. Yes, neighborhoods do have different characteristics, but they're, some principles of pedestrian safety, urban design, building a community where people feel recognized are human universal things. So I think it's important to not let that type of site specificity get us into a place where, well, this corridor is currently this way and people aren't really walking along it a little bit. So, we're going to give it this sort of a design that isn't going to think about how this could be transformed. I don't think you're saying that, but I sometimes see site-specific discussion within community planning discussions fall prey to such ways of thinking. And I don't think it's usually intentional, but like, let's continually challenge ourselves on that element. So.
100%.
Also, just to respond further, site specific can't sit by itself. It is always, that statement is in tension with consistent, right? So there's consistent and site specific, and they're in tension on purpose.
I'll make just one last comment and then I think we can move on to the next item, which is, I agree, like the site specificity is important, but the generality also is just a cost saving thing, right? We want to have some site specific, but then overall over the system, we want to have some cost saving in design as well, and maintenance over time. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, we can move on to your next item. Thank you all so much. This was very helpful. As you can see, it led to a pretty rich conversation. Our next item is a recognition of staff service. So we have two folks who are, either leaving the field or I guess retiring or not leaving the field, but like doing different kinds of work. But all that said, we want to acknowledge both Mr. Mullen and Ms. Baudet. Do feel free to come up. And y'all will have an opportunity to talk as well. And I do want to say, before we get to hear from them, I do want to open it up to any committee members who would like to say anything. Any words? And I'm happy to open it up, I think, just to say, really, thank you both so much for the service that you've put in, not just in the Light Rail conversations and the Project Connect conversations, but in so much of the other work that you've done in our community. And truly, we are fortunate to have you here and working not just on Project Connect, but on so many different things. And I really have to say, I think it's been on a personal level, it's just been a joy working with both of you. And then I've worked with both of you in different capacities. And having said that, I just really want to say, from the work that we're doing, we know you're going to be missed. We also know you're going to continue to do amazing work, whether in this community or other communities. So we're fortunate overall. But having said that, I just want to say, Ms. Bode, I feel like particularly, all the work that you've done before, I'm not even going to go into it because you have such a long career of service to the city of Austin. I work with you in so many ways, but particularly I think at the Project Connect office, you were really able to work on making those connections between the different parties and the different pieces and bringing it all together. And it is a very complex project at the end of the day. And I think having that ability to connect folks, really making sure that at the end of the day, community voices remain front and center, and community views and beliefs and the values that we have as an Austin community really live through the work that you did. I really want to thank you and for all of your leadership at the Project Connect office. And then certainly, Mr. Mullen, with you as well, I think really we're seeing this here. You cannot stop jumping in. Still guide so much of the great work we're doing. And there's no doubt that the foundation you've laid for some of those design work is going to live through the lifetime of this project, not just construction, but beyond. And for that, of course, we're very indebted to you. And also with that, I think bringing in the same piece of the same values of, like you were saying, how do we keep that community vision of design alive, making sure that we're responsive. I think that sort of really sense of attention to the uniqueness of different parts of our community and engaging with that and making sure at the end of the day, we're advancing a project that speaks to all of those different values. So just really a big thank you to both of you and for all of your service, for your work, and you'll certainly be missed. And before we let them go, is there any other committee members who would like to say anything?
Thank you. Thank you for especially you, Anik, but like listening to me for many, many years and all the crazy things I say. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Leslie's going to go ahead. We'll give you both time in the end to definitely speak as well. We'll first sing your praises. That's how this goes. Then you can be humble.
Yeah, well, sorry, I didn't prepare it all. So I just wanted to say sort of ditto, but it's maybe I'll say that it seemed bizarre, the idea of you guys not working for the people here, but I'm somewhat confident we can hold it together. And maybe to some extent the example of sort of working for the people and figuring things out. I think we have a lot of people that have worked for y'all and figured things out. And so we're going to figure it out. But thank you for all the things you've figured out for the people of Austin. So
thank you. Yep, go ahead. Either one of you can get started.
Well, first of all, thank you all. I mean, I will say personally, this has been a huge privilege to do this work for the city of Austin and the community of Austin, but also to work with this group in particular. I'm consistently amazed, and tonight is yet, another affirmation of the way in which this group digs into design issues. And affirms the fact that like design actually matters, which is not always the case in these kinds of contexts, right? Sometimes that can get lost in the conversation, but really, I think this group really has leaned into making sure that the design principles and hopefully eventually the final design, once it gets developed, really serves the people in the way that we aspire it to do. And so I trust you all will do that. And I really appreciate it because it's what's going to make this whole thing really sing and work and belong to this place and to this community. So I really thank you for that. And it's been just a pleasure to work with you all. It's always felt meaningful. I'll be honest, like the collaboration has felt really meaningful and not just about checking the box. And that also is something that I think is rare. And, I really appreciate the way that you engage and I hope you will continue to do it in that way. So thank you.
Okay, so same. Thank y'all very much for taking the time to recognize both me and Peter. Yeah, being here with this audience and having y'all say thank you. I will say thank you right back because the work. I mean, having Susan say thanks for listening to me through various planning processes over the years. Without y'all's voices and the community voices saying you want better things in Austin when it comes to mobility and safety, land use, all of it is connected. We couldn't do our jobs. So thank you as well for helping us get it all done. And I agree with Jay that over the last couple of weeks, just reflecting on a lot of retirement parties and kudos, and it's been truly amazing. One thing I'm the most proud of, and I know that the work is going to keep getting done and be done really well because you see the talent sitting over there today that briefed you on engineering and design and sustainability. But when I think of all the people I've hired at the city who are amazing and they've come into their own and at one point there were 2 people working on bikes and peds at the city and probably nobody working on trees, and there was no heritage tree ordinance. And so when I think about how much has been accomplished in the 26 years I've been working at the city, 28, I can't remember, the best is yet to come. I mean, there's so many people engaged now, and that's what it takes, right? We have Project Connect. There was a time when we didn't have a transit plan and, all the things. So, yeah, my heart swells with what's yet to come. I'm still going to be in Austin. Peter won't, but he'll come back and visit. And so I'll be around and I'll be watching, and you may see me at council yelling about something. I don't know. Yes. And I mean, and just tonight I was thinking, when you were saying, oh, we need, tree maintenance, and my brain is already spinning on like, what am I going to do in retirement to help that get done? Because that's really important. So anyway, thank you all very much for this recognition. And again, as Peter said, it's been the honor of my life to serve the city and be able to have the space to do the things that were passionate to me. I got into planning and transportation because I like clean air. That was my kind of drive to do this work, and it became so much more than that. So anyway, thank you all so much.
Thank you both so much. And, once we wrap up the meeting in a few minutes here, our hope is to have a little bit of a celebration. So hopefully folks will stay and join us for that. And again, thank you both for your service. And I'll say, yes, you have an open invitation to come and speak to this committee. You can shout at us. You can tell us all sorts of things and tell us things that are important, whether you work here or not as community members, and whether you're here or not, you're willing, to give your feedback on how do we move all of this forward. So you're always welcome. Hey, thank you so much. This takes us to our staff updates. We'll start with ATP and see, Ms. Chavez, if you have any updates.
We don't have any updates beyond what we've already talked about today. And CAP Metro as well does not have updates.
Appreciate that. And I don't think we have any updates from the city of Austin or CAP Metro, which takes us to working group updates. I'll just quickly give an update. I think, we're going to be circling back on some of the work around the anti-displacement working group very soon in the coming year. We're going to start thinking about our funding cycle, the next 2-year tranche, and how do we sort of work on that. That's something coming up. And then I know we're scheduling a meeting with the Austin Light Rail group as well. I don't know if there's other working groups that want to give feedback. And actually, I'm realizing the governance working group met as well with staff, and we gave a lot of feedback on the website. Thank you, Ms. Summers. I know you had given some feedback in the past meeting as well. We made sure all of that was incorporated. So you'll see the website has shifted a little, and I know we're continuing to make improvements on that. That takes us to future meetings and agenda items. Do we have any requests for future agenda items? Okay, that moves us forward much faster. Great, we're going to keep going. And of course, we'll have our January meeting and we'll set out the agenda for that. Again, thank you all for doing that. And if I'm not hearing otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting of the Project Connect Community Advisory Committee at 6:05 p.m. Thank you all so much and happy holidays.